A little bit about me. I worked in the medical field for about 20 years, working 10 to 12 hours a day, sometimes 6 and even 7 days a week. And I found myself living paycheck to paycheck. The more I earned, the more I spent. I couldn't figure out how to get ahead. Um, I struggled. I struggled for a long time providing for my children. Now that they're grown, I decided to take the plunge into the financial services industry. And that is so that I can regain some of my time because I missed out on a lot of time with them by working so many hours. And I just refuse to continue that lifestyle. And I know the story is not mine and mine alone. It is estimated that 70% of Americans are in the same boat. And it doesn't discriminate, rich, poor, it doesn't discriminate by what nationality you are. So we're all in the same boat. So when we talk about wealth, do you understand that? Do you agree, excuse me, do you agree that most Americans don't understand how money works? I think this is a pretty broad statement and it applies to everyone. So let's look at some professional athletes. According to a 2009 Sports Illustrated article, 78% of NFL players are either bankrupt or under financial stress within 2 years of retirement. And an estimated 60% of NBA players go bankrupt within 5 years. Some names to that NFL and NBA list is people like Adrian Peterson, running back with a successful 15-year career in the NFL, playing for the Minnesota Vikings, the New Orleans Saints, the Washington Redskins, and most recently the Seattle Seahawks. And over his career, he earned $100 million. However, he mismanaged his wealth and lived lavishly and made poor investments. And ultimately, it led to him being bankrupt in 2024. Another name in, the wide stream professional athletes lane here is Cheryl Swoops, who dominated the WNBA. She had her own signature shoe line with Nike and had substantial endorsement money on top of her playing salary, but she lost it all due to poor investment. Dennis Rodman. This is a name that sticks out in everyone's mind because of his colorful hair and other attributes. Prominent NBA career, but he engaged in an extravagant lifestyle himself, recklessly spending and gambling and making other poor financial decisions. But it doesn't just plague professional athletes. What about actors and actresses who we oftentimes feel are wealthy in our mind? Kim Basinger, she bought an entire town in Brazelton, Georgia, um, as a real estate investment. She was going to create this tourist destination, and ultimately that failed. And she slowly but surely sold off pieces of that property, that land, that town, until it was pretty much resolved. Will Smith, again, too. We know a lot about Will Smith, right? Or at least most of us do. Lived lavishly, but he never set aside funds for taxes. What a downfall. Um, these are the groups that we consider wealthy, right? And yet I apologize, everyone. I guess we got disconnected there for a short time, but let's continue on. Um, these groups, again, we would consider wealthy, but they struggle just like we do. So I would have to say that most Americans do not understand how money works. And if you agree with that statement, put an 8 in the chat. So let's take a look at some important language of financial literacy. And before we get into the slide, let me just tell you a little childhood story. I grew up in your typical middle working class family. We had enough to live well and take vacations. We never really wanted for anything. We had everything provided for us. And as far as I knew, we were doing okay financially. My parents owned some businesses, et cetera, et cetera. However, it was always the kind of language that I heard was the poverty language. Go to school, get good grades, get a good job. When you find a good job, keep it. Money is the root of all evil. The rich are robbing the poor. Money doesn't buy happiness. They don't pay much. The rich should pay more taxes, and things have gotten really expensive. No one ever taught me the other side, the wealth language. Go to school, get good grades, and start a business. Even though my parents owned multiple businesses between them, they did not encourage us to do that. And that was because they worked a lot. They gave up a lot of their time. But now they don't give up their time. They're getting to reap the rewards of that. So a job is a good place to start, but it's not a good place to finish. It's called the corporate ladder, not the corporate bed. Money isn't everything, but it ranks right up there with oxygen. And money is best exchanged for experiences, not things. Don't work for money, teach your money to work for you. So when we start thinking about money, you are either mastering money or you are letting money master you, which is what this quote here says. So, what exactly is wealth? I know a lot of you have heard the same phrase that I heard growing up, and that was money doesn't grow on trees. Well, I thought it did growing up because we had a tree called the Pleomele hawaiiensis in our backyard. And as kids, we used it as actual currency, play currency, that is, while we were playing store and house, et cetera, et cetera. And I would love to have one of those trees in my backyard right now if it worked in the same way. Unfortunately, it doesn't. So, what is wealth? Wealth is the byproduct of money making money for you. And as our fearless leader, Mr. Suni Samad says, money grows on trees when you realize money itself is the seed and the harvest. So, what exactly is the wealth formula, and how do you cultivate your money tree by using it? Um, this is important because we cannot work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. At least I can't, not without calling in sick or complaining about it to everyone who will listen. The typical person works 40 hours a week for about 40 years. And with an average salary of about $50,000 a year, that's just $2 million. But what if you had exemplary employees like Andrew Jackson or Ulysses S. Grant or Benjamin Franklin, who can work 24/7, 365 without complaining or calling in sick? It could be possible to make that $2 million in considerably less time. So which would be more valuable? 2 million earned over 40 years or 2 million over 20 years? I think that it would be a lot better if I earned it in less time. So the way we do that is with this wealth formula. Time plus capital plus rate of return minus inflation minus taxes equals wealth. Let's look at this in a little more detail. So allowing your money enough time for the interest to compound and build up your wealth is the way you build wealth. So we have Mr. Start Early and Mr. Start Late, two friends of mine. Both of them are about 25 years young. They work really good jobs and they have about $1,000 a month in disposable income. After learning about the wealth formula, let me try and present my screen again. Thank you so much, KJ. Um, can you see it now?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Perfect. Thank you so much for letting me know. So anyhow, we have Mr. Start Early and Mr. Start Late. 25 years young, great jobs, $1,000 a month in disposable income. And after learning about the wealth formula, Mr. Start Early decides he's ready to cultivate his money tree. So he starts saving $300 a month, or about $3,600 a year in an investment vehicle that earns about 8% interest. His $3,600 are the seeds, and the 8% interest is the soil. So his tree starts to grow. You can see your 1, 2, 3, and 4 here on this slide. And we progress into years 5, 6, and 7, at which time he stops investing in this vehicle. And at that same time, he runs into Mr. Start Late. Mr. Start Late's like, hey, how's it going with that money thing? Is that working out for you? And after some discussion, Mr. Start Late finally, the light bulb goes off in his head. And so he decides to start investing. So at age 32, Mr. Start Late starts putting in his $3,600, his seeds, into that 8% soil. And he invests year after year, as you can see here, for several years. Oh, excuse me, for several. Holy moly, I am going backwards on my slides. I apologize. Here we are at age 48 is when Mr. Start Late finally has the same total contribution as, or excuse me, same amount in his investment vehicle that Mr. Start Early does. The difference is that Mr. Start Early stopped investing. Remember, way back at age 31, Mr. Start Late, he had to contribute until he was 48. So from 32 until 48. And the total contribution by Mr. Start Early was $25,200 versus Mr. Start Late, who ultimately contributed $61,200 to yield the same amount of money in his investment vehicle. So, because Mr. Start Early understood the wealth formula and through the power of leveraging time and compound interest, his seeds continued to multiply without having to continually put more in. So, with all of this, we have to understand what this rate of return is, right? This soil, as I called it on the previous slide. Um, the quality of your soil is going to determine how much you're going to actually receive in the end, the quantity of your harvest. So when we understand that the average American is retiring on a 401k or a 403b with about $87,000, we have to ask ourselves why. Why is that happening? I just helped a friend roll over her 401k after retiring after 20 years of service for a particular large corporation. And she literally left with $94,000 after 20 years. That is not much of a retirement after working, 20 years. And why is this? Because at some point when she was probably around 29, she got into some kind of financial emergency and she ended up borrowing from her 401k. Pretty typical story. The first time she borrowed from there, it was super easy. It was a sincere need and it was justified. However, the next time she had a financial emergency, it was so much easier to borrow. She didn't have to even justify it. So she kept taking money out of that account. And the problem with that is it becomes a habit. Every time we need a little extra money, we dip into our 401k and ultimately affect how much we end up with in the end. Um, so we have to be intentional with that journey. And one way to do that is by following the rule of 72, which states that any interest rate divided into 72 is going to determine how long it takes for your principal to double. And the rate of return, meaning the percentage that you gain on your soil, how much your soil, how good your soil is going to also improve that amount. So if we look at this example here, we have 4 29-year-olds with an original seed amount of $10,000. And this particular individual here invested in a very safe 1% rate of return. So it took them until age 101 to double their money. This individual invested in a 4% soil. So their money doubled every 18 years. So at 65, they now have $40,000. This individual, their $10,000 doubled every 9 years. So at 65, they have $160,000. And this final individual here in this example had a 10% soil, right? So their money doubled every 7.2 years. So by the time they retired at 65, they had $320,000. So food for thought. Would you prefer to plant your money in a low quality soil or a high quality soil? If you agree that a high quality soil is where you would want to put your money, put an 8 in the chat. So how do we do this? I know that when I was a teen and a young adult, my parents encouraged me to open. Actually, my parents encouraged me. I have to say, my parents did a little bit better by me. They started some bank accounts for me in my, prior to my preteen years, and they were putting, a small portion of money, not enough to make a huge dent, but enough. And then they taught me to put in that when I was a teen and had a job. So they told me open an interest bearing checking account and savings account. If you were told the same thing, put it 1 in the chat for me. So I had to look at this now. This is something I learned at the last minute. It was very, very recent. I did not realize that I was only getting a tiny little bit of money every time. So I've saved up all this money as a teen and a young adult, and I might have made a couple $100 on my money over many, many years. And why is that? That's because banks only give me a tiny percentage, about 0.02% of what they are earning. And what are they earning? And how are they doing it? Well, they're doing it by bank-owned life insurance. They are investing here, as you can see, Bank of America, $24 billion of bank-owned life insurance. And they're making an amazing rate of return. In exchange, they give me 0.02%. They give you 0.02%. So they're making a profit on our money. Why can't we do the same, right? The average interest rate on cash value life insurance over the last 20 years has averaged between 8 and 10%. So I have to ask again, if they're making 8 to 10%, why am I only getting 0.02%? It's just how it works, right? Safe investment. So what are some ways that your money can grow? We've got our fixed growth, right? That is our banks, right? Our savings accounts, our CDs, they're very predictable, they're very safe. Okay. Slow fixed gains. And then you have your variable growth. Think stock market, where things are going up and down. There's a high potential for loss, but there's also a high potential for gain. You just never know. So in this variable example, if I invest $1,000 and I lose 10%, I'll still have $900. But if the stock market goes back up by 10%, I don't regain what I lost. I only regain 90 of the $100 that I lost. So it's still a a risky area to be. Higher returns, but a higher risk, right? And then we've got something called an index strategy. As an example, this is a what we call a zero floor or a zero is my hero situation. The risk is medium and it involves indexed accounts, typical of a indexed universal life product, as an example. So the way this works is when the stock market goes up, my money goes up. When the stock market goes down, I don't lose a penny. And that's because my money isn't actually participating in the stock market. It's just mimicking the market. So if I invest in an index strategy today, we're going to look over a 12-month period retroactively to see what the market did. And if the market did 10%, I get an interest credit that accounts for those gains. If the market goes down below zero or at zero, I don't lose anything, but I don't gain anything. Hence, again, zero is my hero. So let's talk a little bit about inflation. Who thinks that the value of our dollar is going up or going down? I say it's going down, especially right now. Things are getting really expensive, right? So, what causes the value of a dollar to decrease? We've got high inflation, right? The price of goods and services rise, and each dollar buys fewer items, and that results in an ultimate lowering of its value. We've got an increased money supply where the Federal Reserve increases the money supply faster than the economy is actually growing, and that results in a weaker currency. We've got lower interest rates where we've got reduced investment demand. Global investors may move their capital from the dollar to other currencies that are offering higher yields. And that subsequently decreases demand for our dollar. We've also got large trade and budget deficits, where we're importing more than we're exporting. And that puts a downward pressure on the dollar's value as well. We've got geopolitical and policy uncertainty, right? And we know about these right now because we've got a lot of these aggressive tariffs that our current president has put into place. And that can slow our growth and lead investors to reassess the outlook of our economy. And that ultimately causes the dollar to decline once again. We also have institutional stability. Again, we've been experiencing this year as well, where there's threats of independence, threats to the independence of the Federal Reserve, or risks of government shutdown, which we've had a few of, right? And that can undermine global confidence in the dollar. And so, once again, a weakened status of the dollar. So for the last 10 years, the inflation rate has been 2.91%, and the value of your dollar decreases annually an average of 3%. So there's a slight difference between those numbers, right? So unless your money is growing at a rate that is greater than the inflation rate, you're losing money. And that's just how things are right now. So what can we do to protect this, right? So we have to talk about how our money is taxed. We've got the likelihood is that we're going to have higher taxes, correct? If you agree with that statement, put an 8 in the chat. Every year that goes by, we get taxed more and more and more. I haven't seen a year where we have paid less tax unless it was on a temporary reduction. So your money is taxed in a lot of different ways, right? We've got our tax now bucket here. Our tax now bucket includes things like mutual funds, stocks, CDs, savings accounts. This is where we've paid with after tax money, and we're going to get taxed when we finally decide we want to utilize this money. Then we've got our tax later bucket. This is our 401ks, our IRAs, our annuities, and 403bs. We use before tax money here, but then we're taxed on withdrawal. Not necessarily a great place to be, but it's what most of us function in. Most of us have 401ks and IRAs, or as a teacher, a 403b, etc. So how do we get out of the taxable buckets and into the tax-free retirement? Well, we want to get into the Roth IRAs. We want to get into some life insurance because we pay for this with after-tax money and it grows tax-free. Amazing. So we have to protect what income we make, and we have to protect it from what? From the what ifs. What if I pass away tomorrow or become critically ill? What if I can no longer produce income? Or what if I lived an extremely healthy life and I outlived my ability to produce income? What can I do to protect that? Well, life insurance as an investment tool. Utilizing something like an index universal life is a great way to protect that. So your greatest asset is your ability to produce income. Your second greatest asset is how well you can protect it. So here is an example of an indexed universal life product. Um, and remember that formula from a while back, a few slides back, where time plus capital plus rate of return minus inflation minus taxes equals wealth. Well, this is how this works. So for an investment capital of $156 a month and a time frame of 20 years for that funding period, and an average rate of return over the last 20 years of 15%, but a rate of return of between 6.42% and 15.88% in a tax advantage growth product within superseding the current inflation rate, you will get wealth, right? You will get growth. So the growth of an investment account tied to a genuine life insurance policy, according to IRS tax code 7702, cannot be classified as income and therefore it cannot be taxed. So it's a great way to protect your money. And unlike your 401k, you can loan against your money void of taxes and penalties. And again, 15% average rate of return over the last 20 years. So it's superseding the current inflation rate by a far. So the wealth formula strategy, we need to talk about some topics here: compounding interest, point-to-point indexing, and how we participate only in the gains and never the losses, because this is that zero is my hero strategy, right? Um, so compound interest is the interest we earn both on the initial principal and the accumulated interest from the previous periods. And this will effectively allow you to earn interest on top of interest, causes savings or investments to grow at an accelerated rate over time rather than just in a straight line. You get this kind of motion instead of this kind of motion. Point-to-point indexing is a fixed index annuity strategy, and that calculates interest based solely on the percentage change of an index, such as the S&P 500, between two specific dates, usually the start and the end of a contract year. And it ignores all interim volatility, that up and down, up and down, up and down. And it caps the gains while providing a zero floor to protect against market losses. So had you put your money into a indexed strategy, you could potentially see the benefits far more compounded than playing the stock market. Don't play Monopoly with your money. Do something really good with your money. So I don't know how many of you remember, but in 2008, we had a huge housing market crash, right? And in 2020, of course, we've all experienced COVID-19, huge impacts on the global economy. So in 2008, the housing market crash was triggered by the bursting of a massive housing bubble. It was fueled by subprime mortgage lending, loose credit standards, and really complex financial products. And as adjustable rate mortgages, they reset higher, home prices fell, and it led to massive defaults and a foreclosure crisis. Some banks even failed. It was called the Great Recession, and it resulted ultimately in over $2 trillion of global economic loss. This was huge. And then in 2020, of course, the U.S. GDP projected losses between 3.2 and 4.8 trillion dollars over 2 years. And this led to sharp increases in unemployment and massive supply chain disruptions, intense inflationary pressures, and it just disproportionately affected lower income workers, women, small businesses, and it increased global poverty for the first time in a generation. And you can see that reflected here on this indexing strategy. We've got losses here in those years. We've got some pretty great losses in those years. But if you had been in an indexed universal life product, you can see zero is my hero. Lots of coverage if you had an index universal life product. So, with all that being said, who is qualified to meet with us? Well, since we are licensed professionals qualified to work with anyone, that means everyone, right? We can customize a strategy that works for anyone. And we meet with our clients every 6 months to guide them and coach them to their financial goals. We want to help you protect your income. We want to see you leave a legacy for your children, right? So the secret is out. The next steps for everyone on this call today is to reach out to the person that invited you and thank them because you just learned a lot of valuable information. If you're not already with OIC, let them know you're interested in becoming our business partner. If you are a client, let us know. We want to help you. And then, of course, refer a friend. Don't keep this secret to yourself. Now is the time to put the formula into action. So if you found this information valuable, please get back to the person that invited you. And it was my absolute pleasure sharing with all of you tonight. Thank you.